Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Paul Downs, Jay Goltz, and Dana White give quick PPP updates and then dive into a discussion of what a $15 federal minimum wage would mean for smaller businesses. Will it lift people out of poverty? Will it put businesses out of business? Will it hurt entry-level employees? I'm listening to you, Jay, Dana tells us at one point, and I'm thinking about the coffee shop owners that I know who will have to close. To which Jay responds, they say they have to close, but did they try raising their prices 5% first? We also tackle a listener-submitted question about the best ways to avoid unemployment claims, which can entail forceful management. There's no way around it, Paul tells us. You gotta be hard at some moments as a boss. You just have to be. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will, if nothing else, let owners know they are not alone in facing these challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes. This week's lineup features Paul Downs, who is founder and CEO of Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, which is based outside of Philadelphia and makes custom conference tables. Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, Artist Frame Service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Dana White, who is CEO of Paralee Boyd, a chain of hair salons based in Detroit. The episode is titled, I Want Clean Hands. Before we get started, one of the recurring themes of this podcast is that marketing is hard for smaller businesses. One reason it's hard is that we are all besieged by self-appointed digital marketing gurus who overwhelm us with outlandish promises. On the other hand, there's Steve Krull, co-founder of Be Found Online. A loyal listener to the 21 Hats podcast, Steve understands the business owners who listen to this podcast because he is one. He knows his stuff, but he's also a real person who you can have a real conversation with. And if you tell him I sent you, you can get a free consultation with Steve himself. Just shoot him an email at steve@befoundonline.com to schedule your talk. That's steve@befoundonline.com. Now on to the show. Welcome, Dana, Paul, and Jay. Hope you guys are doing well. Let's start. I'd like to do a quick PPP update. How about you, Paul? Last time you were here, you told us that you were getting your application in and you were very much hoping for a quick turnaround. How'd that go?
It went as advertised. Very quick turnaround. I had to have one conversation with a guy from the bank, and he said, "You're good." And the money appeared the next day.
Wow.
Very simple.
Nice. And you were hoping to get it quickly because your phone wasn't ringing. Has that changed at all? Has sales picked up at all?
We did scrape it out in the last week of January and hit our target for January, 358,000. And we just made a nice sale today. So far, the sales are coming in. The phone calls are still way behind where they were in 2019. But I don't know what to do about that. It's possible that the people who aren't calling are the ones who never would have bought anyway. So it's a 25% drop in the number of calls, but maybe we don't care about some of that. We'll see.
Dana, how about you? I think last week you told us that you had sent your application off to the bank. Any progress?
None.
What's going on?
No progress. I don't know. I go on twice a day to their little portal, check application status, and it still says under review. I'm with PNC. So
is that the bank that helped you on the first round?
No, the PNC was a little slow to shoot and everybody was nervous, with the first round, like, oh, I want to get it in, because they may run out of money. And so I went ahead. Goldman Sachs provided an opportunity for Goldman Sachs alumni of the 10KSB program to go through them to apply. So I did, and I received it. Now that everything seems a little bit more ordered, I went ahead and did my application through my bank. Last Tuesday, I did it. And so nothing as of today.
Are you at all concerned about money running out this time?
Yes and no. I'm not asking for a lot. I think and they put restrictions on who can apply. So I'm getting nervous now because I'd like my, application to get submitted to the SBA, but I'm not as nervous as I was the first time. I know more now, and I think the businesses and banks are working smarter this time. So we'll see. You never know.
For what it's worth, my bank is PNC too. And but I had gotten the first round of PPP through them, and they gave me the impression that helped get the second one through quicker. Okay. Now, the person who called me was a senior vice president in charge of agricultural operations in Tennessee. And I don't know why. I said, "Why are you calling me?" And he's just like, "Well, it's just all hands on deck. We're calling, we get given a list of names and we call them." And so I wouldn't necessarily despair that if they haven't contacted you. I think that similar to the spring, that this is actually kind of tricky for banks to just process a huge number of applications at one time.
Okay. Another friend of mine who went the same route as I did, his PNC approval came back very quickly. He filed, I think, this Tuesday and is going to closing tomorrow.
Jay, last time we talked, you said that you didn't think you were going to apply this time because you didn't think you needed it. Is that still where you are?
No, that's not where I'm at. It turns out that I am qualified. I do need it. And the bank, to their credit, has been very on top of it. And he's the one that called us and said, "Your numbers all qualify. You should do it." And I did it, and it worked.
You've talked to us many times about your efforts to get a new loan that would give you a mortgage on a building that has no mortgage on it. And every time you've told us about it, you've concluded with some optimism that you think maybe this week it's going to come through.
Yeah.
Are you feeling less confident about that? It sounds like you are.
No, I've got one bank left who wants to do the deal.
So I assume this is part of the reason you decided to go ahead and apply for the PPP.
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I suspect there are a lot of businesses in the same situation that you are, meaning you had a rough time in the spring when the pandemic hit, when you had to shut down, but business came back. And when we spoke about this last time, you said you might not need it because business had come back, and you weren't sure this was intended for you. How are you feeling about that now?
A, it was intended for me because my numbers were off, I fit right into the thing.
You definitely qualify.
And B, here's the part that I wasn't thinking about. I've had a credit line for the last 30 years. I no longer have a credit line at the bank.
Why is that?
Because I'm a retail pariah. That's why. Because, you're a retailer? They can't get away from you fast enough.
They took away your credit line?
Yeah. I don't know if you could call it took away or didn't renew it.
Had you been using the credit line?
Yes, absolutely. I use it every single year. I lose a good amount of money. January, February, March, April, business is slower, and then I make it up. I'm in a retail cycle, and I use the credit line as it's supposed to be. I borrow from it, and then I pay it back at the end of the year. Been the same way for 30 years. Now, all of a sudden, part of it is my bank got bought by the bigger bank. It's a different deal. The bank I used to be with made their living lending money to small business. That was their niche. Now the bigger bank bought them out. They've got other niches. They've got banks on every corner. They've got big corporate business.
I want to ask you about some other aspect of the PPP, which is this. In the legislation that renewed it and gave us round 2, there was also a change to the employee retention tax credit. And William went off about this last week on the show, talking about how it's very complicated, requires a lot of math and hours of analysis. But in the end, he found it was going to have, in his words, a pretty incredible impact for him. Have any of you looked at the employee retention tax credit? And do you qualify? And does it look incredible to you?
I did. I took a brief glance at it, and it looked like we qualified because we were shut down by state action on March 18th of last year and didn't open up until April 28th. But during that time, the employees that I had who could work from home continued to work from home, and I continued to pay them. So that is, as far as I could tell, was payroll that qualified under this under the terms of this. And I didn't work out the math of how much it was exactly, but let's just say it's $10,000 for sake of argument. The difficulty was in trying to figure out how to actually get it. I read through the Treasury Department webpage about it, and they referred to a particular form that you could fill out, but there was no mechanism by which you submitted the form. It wasn't clear who you sent it to or how you did it, and it just started to look like, oh my God, here we go down some other rabbit hole. And that particular morning, I didn't feel like entering that. So I set it aside, and that's where I'm at the moment. $10,000 is nothing to sneeze at, and maybe it's $20,000, maybe it's $5,000, but it's nothing to sneeze at, but it's not a game changer for me right now. So after the encouragement received in the morning report and from William, I'm going to go back and take another look at it. But it did appear to be extremely complicated to actually get it somehow.
Interesting. Jay or Dana, do either of you look at it?
I didn't even know about it until the morning report came up with it. Now I have a full-time CFO, MBA CFO, been here for 20 some years. He didn't know about it. He looked into it. He's on a webinar as we speak, finding out more about it. But he said there's controversy as to exactly how it works. And it's the same story again. The rules are unclear. He's trying to navigate it, but I feel bad for someone who doesn't. He literally, that's all he does. He's a full-time my CFO. He's working on it, and he thinks that we qualify, and he thinks it'll be worth the trouble. But he's on a webinar right now to try being the operative word, to try to figure out exactly how it works.
Dana, have you even given any thought?
I have, and I'm meeting with my bookkeeper / accountant just to see if it's even worth it or if I qualify. I think our biggest thing for Pearly Boyd is forgiveness. We're trying to look more into forgiveness and then whatever tax credits come after that.
I want to ask you guys about another topic that's in the news right now. There's a lot of talk, once again, about the never-ending debate about the $15 minimum wage. Every story you read suggests it's either going to lift millions of people out of poverty or destroy thousands of businesses, or maybe both. Are any of you concerned about this?
Not me. Not for my primary business, because the lowest wage we're paying right now is $18.50 plus benefits, and it just, it doesn't make any difference. However, I'm on the board of a nonprofit which operates in the food service space, and it would have more of an effect there. And just to, do some quick math, what's the difference between a $10 an hour person and a $15 an hour person? If I get it right in my head, it's about $10,000 a year. So however many employees you have times plus 10,000, I think that is a powerful incentive to look for ways to increase the productivity as opposed to just continue the same model. Your question, will it raise people out of poverty? Yes, it will. The ones who are worth it. And will it drive automation? Absolutely. Because there is a difference between the least productive employees and better employees. And a lot of times a cheaper employee is just more trouble than they're worth. So I could see it certainly driving the evisceration of that entry-level job and sort of raising the bar of what is the basic requirement to enter the workforce.
Let me put some math to that, because you just gave a good example of where I think there's a misconception. Let's talk about the one you just talked about, the food service. So what do they sell? Are they selling hamburgers?
The bakery.
Okay, a bakery. Okay, fair enough. Now, what do you think their percentage on sales, how much do they pay in labor? I'm going to guess 30%?
You guess.
30%.
Let's say, it's somewhere between 30 and 50, depending on how you
let's say 40. Fair enough. 40. Let's say 40. Now, if you raise it from 10 to 15, that's a 50% increase. But everybody's not going to get the 50% increase because so many employees aren't making the 10. It's going to compress the difference between the experienced person and the new one, but it's not going to, everybody's not going to be going up 50%. So can we agree maybe the labor costs are going to go up 25%?
I wouldn't think about it that way, Jay. I mean, I think that the actual dollar amounts are a little more revealing.
And this is math. Let me just finish then. So
Right,
my point is,
you can write math to do one thing, you can write to do another thing. I mean, in our case, we've got budgets of around $250,000 for this enterprise. So if I've got 4 employees and I'm adding an extra $10,000, that is a pretty significant bump in our cost.
as I said, this isn't an opinion. This is math. So my question is, here's the math. If their sales are $800,000 a year, it would require raising prices by 5% in order to cover that. And the argument is, if everybody has to do it, then perhaps everyone, instead of paying $10 for that cake, they're going to pay $10.50 now. So I don't know that that's going to drive people out of business. So I think it's a false argument. I think the argument is, if this goes through, I'm going to have to raise my prices. And if I raise my prices, people won't pay that price. And I don't think you know that until you try it. And if everybody needs to raise the cake from $10 to $10.50, I'm not sure it's going to ruin the business. And I think the statistics of everywhere that's done it has proven out that, in fact, most people don't go broke over it unless they don't pass it along.
Wow. Yeah.
Math.
I don't disagree with that analysis.
It's math to scale, though. Like, I'm listening to you, Jay, and I'm thinking about the coffee shop owners that I know who have to close.
Wait, no. They say they have to close, but did they try raising their prices 5% first?
But they don't have the volume. But they've done the raising prices scale model. How much do we need to raise our prices just to make ends meet? How much do we have to raise our prices to, come just below that and not pay ourselves or bring more family on? And I think, if you have an $800,000 a year business, sure. What they're finding is it's going to happen if we're going to have 1, maybe 2 employees. And this has to become a family run business where the younger part of the family isn't getting a salary because they're living at home with mom and dad. Right?
Except that's illogical. It's the same. Doesn't matter what the size of the business is. It still comes down to, if it's a smaller business, there's less dollars you're paying out. It's still simple math. So if they're charging $3 for the cup of coffee and they raise it to $3.50, that should more than cover the extra expense.
But not if they're only selling 3 or 4 cups a day.
If they're only selling 3 or 4 cups a day, they don't have any employees. So it's a bad argument. It's math.
All right, Jay, you've proven that it's going to be no problem for everybody in the economy, and I hope you're right. But
no, I haven't proven
there's
anything.
A couple of
I've
other
proven
things
that people that say they will go out of business because of it, unless they've gone ahead and raised their prices and then have gone out of business, it's all a theory. If they're that small, it's not going to add up that much to the business. And the miracle of adding 10 or 20 or 30 cents to the product would cover the costs of the increase.
I disagree completely. I don't think the raising of prices will solve for small businesses who don't have the volume, who don't have the family. They have to grow their business so they can bring on a manager. The long term of this will hurt my business. It may not hurt my business in the first year, but a lot of them don't want to be mega coffee shops. They want to be small, local coffee shops, but they don't want to have to work 96 to 100 hours.
You're conflating all these things into a simple minimum wage raise. They have a business problem then. If they can't figure out how to hire a manager, this has nothing to do with the minimum wage.
But if they can't afford to hire a manager, though.
They can't afford to hire a manager because they're not making enough money because they don't have a successful business. This has nothing to do with minimum wage. Everything gets thrown at the minimum wage.
But you're defining successful differently than they are. They want to stay small.
No, I'm saying math. If you have to raise a minimum wage employee up, it's a simple math. I think they did a thing with Target and Walmart and found out if they raised their prices 1%, they could pay everybody more money. It depends on what your margins is, what your labor costs are. But I got it. But no, it's still math. My point is, this isn't an opinion. It's math. If you raise the minimum wage, it all turns into a mathematical amount of money that's a percentage of your gross sales. And in many cases, A minimal increase in your pricing, meaning 3, 4, 5% will make up for the minimum wage raise. And the rest of this is a whole other issue.
I want to give Paul a chance to respond to what Jay said, but first, Dana, are you concerned about the impact of this on your business?
Not anymore. I was.
Why not? What changed?
Because my operations manager and I worked it out while, Biden was on television, and, she texted me and said, we're going to have to work this out. And I said, okay. And so we did. How
did you work it out? What did you do?
We no longer are hiring shampoo assistants unless it's on the busier days. And all of our stylists will do both, but they get a higher commission. So I'm fortunate that in my industry, I can pay hourly and do commission and pay them the higher of the two. It just so happens that when I pay them the higher of the two, it's a commission, right? So when, they don't meet commission, if they don't hit a certain number of heads, then they get the hourly. But the hourly works out to be less than the commission, because if they see 3 or 4 heads an hour at $12 a head, well, that's how much they're making per hour. But again, it's the volume. The math works because we have the volume. The second we go down to, our slow season and we're not marketing, or we go back to the numbers that we used to have before we grew, people paying, 1 or 2 or 3 people in a shift, $15 an hour to sit because we don't have the volume. And then I raise my prices. Okay, I raise my prices, and then we still don't have the volume. Then I have to start letting people go.
Well, that's a problem if you're paying people sitting around doing nothing, and that's in the business model. And let me say, I'm just saying in any business.
Nothing. Yeah. By nothing, I mean hair.
I got it, but I'm just saying, and Paul's totally right. This is going to make it hard for a younger person or for someone with no skill. There's no question. I'm not arguing that at all. He's correct. If you're going to pay $15 an hour, you might as well get a grown up and not hire some kid that you're going to have to put more time into. You're 100% right on that. And I would also say there's a huge problem with this in that telling Jay in Chicago to pay $15 an hour, which I have to anyway because it's Chicago, and telling some guy in Biloxi, Mississippi to pay, that's not right. I mean, the cost of living is dramatically different. It's also not right that I pay health insurance, I pay vacations. Me paying $15 is very different than someone paying $15 who only hires part-time people and doesn't give any benefits, no health insurance, no vacation time, blah, blah, blah. So it's not right. No, trust me.
That's what I'm saying. I'm with you there. Yeah.
There's no question.
Part of the problem there is that if you leave it to Mississippi, it'll never get raised. But Paul, have you finished your critique of Jay's critique?
No, I mean, Jay sort of slipped it in as if it was an asterisk in a footnote, but those are pretty critical points he just raised. And I mean, Dana just said it herself. She's going to cut out some of the lower skilled positions in her company because basically that job isn't worth $15 an hour.
So, Paul, is the concern that you're raising the loss of jobs or the threat to the business?
Well, here's my concern. And I will say that I am actually in favor of minimum wages in the absence of something like universal basic income. Okay. If you don't have minimum wage, it's a race to the bottom. And the people who suffer in those kinds of games are the ones who are least equipped to get themselves out of those situations, that it sets up exploitation. So setting up $15 minimum wage so that someone can make a decent living from working 40 hours a week, I've got nothing against that. I'm all for it. But there will be knock-on effects. And the fact that it's been tried in a bunch of high-cost urban areas, and there wasn't a huge difference because, as Jay correctly pointed out, you could do a relatively modest price raise and absorb the extra costs. Okay. Roll it out to every town and city in America, and you're going to see a lot of operations that formerly were viable slip over the edge. I think Dana is right that it is a cost. You're going to see the dynamics within companies, something which is utterly invisible to economists, play out. So you give the worst worker a raise to $15 an hour, and your former, mid-level and good workers were making $16 an hour. Now what do you do? So the price of labor will go up across the board.
Does that apply to you, Paul? You said before, you talked about your own business. You're not paying anybody at the minimum wage, but will there be pressure on the wages for your employees?
Within Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, I don't think it'll have any effect at all because we're already a high-skilled, high-pay operation, and that's not the world we live in. With the bakery I run, it's going to raise a couple of people, and let's say it's going to cost us $40,000. But it's the new hires that are going to be more difficult because when you hire someone new, you have to start paying them from the minute they show up, and you also have to train them, and you have to manage them, and those things are expensive. Particularly, a $10 an hour employee requires more management than an $18 an hour employee, and so that there's going to be a lot of businesses which don't have systems set up to manage employees at that cost level. And so you're increasing the cost of the labor and of the management.
In what you describe, I am that company. I do have people that are making $17 an hour, and I am going to have to make some adjustments. What this is doing is it's bringing down the difference between the new employee and the one that's been doing it for 10 years. There might have been a $5 spread per hour. Now it's going to be $3 or $2, and it has affected that. And I'm by no means suggesting this is a perfect model. They should make $15 every week. Not at all. I think it's clumsily done and needs to be done more surgically. And I think it should probably be left to the states because I don't think you can.
Even if the states don't do anything?
Yeah,
well,
maybe, we have that now. States
all right,
compete
then make
just
them
like businesses compete.
Then how about this? How about taking the state that their minimum wage is 7? What about making them do 10 then? I mean, what's with they're going to go from 7 to 15 over?
It's not 7 to 15. The legislation hasn't been written as far as I know, but I think what they're talking about is phasing this in over 4 years.
Okay, whatever they do, treating Illinois the same as they treat whatever the lowest income state in the country is not right. It's just not right. I mean, there needs to be some wiggle room there, and then not allowing. Do you realize why all these big stores now have part-time people? They figured out how to get out of paying health insurance, which is why many studies have been made. How many people that work at Walmart are getting government subsidies? They figured out how to get around it.
I don't think we're going to settle this today. Let's move on to something else.
Wait, just to be clear, my guess is if we all sat down and laid this all out, we'd all be on the same page. The only point I'm trying to make is before someone screams, oh my God, if minimum wage goes up, I'm going to go out of business, I'd like to hear their math. Look, Dana figured out how to make it work. I believe there's many other companies that could figure out how to make it work. Many.
Let's go to a question that was submitted by a listener. It comes from a woman who's submitted a previous question that we've dealt with, Liz Picarazzi of CityBin, who sent me a whole bunch of really good questions. She wants to know how you guys handle bogus lawsuits and unemployment claims.
Those are two completely separate things. Those are
two different topics.
Two different topics. Pick one, Lauren. Just pick one of them.
Unemployment claims.
Want to hear my 4 keys to getting my unemployment rate 20 years ago got up to the maximum, maybe 30 years, got up to 7.2% of the first X amount of income.
I think we have to define what that is. When people hear unemployment rate, they think you're talking about the national unemployment rate.
All right, here today in Illinois, you pay a percentage somewhere between, I don't have it in front of me, 1% or 0.5% up to 7.2% of the first, whatever it is, $14,000 of income. I'm close. That's Illinois only, which means that if you get up to 7.2%, you're going to pay $1,000 a year per employee for unemployment. Whereas if you're at the bottom, you're going to pay next to nothing. It's going to be hundreds of dollars. Okay. So I got my rate from 7.2 down to 0.6 or something over the years. How did I do that, you ask? Good question. First of all,
we don't even need to be here, Jay.
Well, you want the answer or not, Lauren? I'll stop if you want.
Keep going.
Number one, I'm much more careful who I hire. We're much more careful doing the interview process, the reference checking, the whole thing. Number two, at 30 days, you own their unemployment. Generally speaking, if someone gets unhired within 30 days, you're not responsible for their unemployment. They could have worked at U.S. Steel for 40 years. You hire them, they're there for 40 days, you own their entire unemployment. It's unbelievable. So number two is, at 28 days, we sit down and think, is this person working out or not? And answers like, well, they're really trying hard, or, well, we've had worse, or we don't take chances with it now. And almost always, you can usually tell by 28 days if this was a good hire. If not, you tell them it's a probationary period. We unhire. It doesn't happen very often, but that certainly helps. Number three, if we manage properly, if we make people productive and work hard, and if they're not working and if there's a problem, we sit down and we have candid conversations. We've told you 3 times about this. We're concerned you're not the right person for this job. I don't know if you knew what you were getting into. And then sometimes they figure it out on their own and they leave on their own, which is better for them and better for us. They look for another job, they leave. Lastly, we document if we have good policies coming in on time. It's all laid out. We treat everyone the same. And if we have to contest it, we usually win. Because of this methodology, I very seldom have an unemployment claim now, because the first 3 things take care of it. And when we do have an unemployment claim, we usually win because it's a slam dunk. We warned them. We told them. They violated the policy. And as a result, I'm telling you, fact, my unemployment rate is down to the minimum. I've had one claim in 3 years that got through. One.
How much money does that save you a year?
I gave you the math. I have 125 employees. If it was at its max, it would cost me about $1,000 a year each. That would be $125,000 in unemployment insurance I'd be paying if I was still at the max.
And you think you're somewhere in the neighborhood of?
Oh, it can't be more than $10,000.
Interesting.
This is kind of the irony to it. If someone's got a super low unemployment rate like the minimum, it means one of 2 things. Either they've gotten to be good managers, they're careful who they hire, and blah, 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 or they never fire anybody because they're terrible managers. Pick one. If they're terrible managers, they're probably going to be out of business eventually. So the unemployment rate is a grade of how is your management, because if you have high unemployment rate, you're doing something wrong. And no one knows better than I did, because I was doing everything wrong. I was a revolving door.
Dana, what's your experience been with bogus unemployment claims?
Well, they're not
documentation.
bogus. They're unemployment claims.
Well, some of them are bogus, right?
Some of them are angry. Some of them are emotional. And some of them are, I don't know what to do, so this is what I'm going to do. So we just document. We document thoroughly, sometimes with video, sometimes with audio, always written out, documentation. And that's how we've been able to keep our unemployment low and then we've hired better, meaning the attitude, everybody coming through the door has a cosmetology license, but they may not have the attitude to work at Paralee Boyd. So we know that the people who come into Paralee Boyd, who want to make Paralee Boyd what they think it should be versus what it is, we know very quickly that these aren't the people who are going to work out. And then like Jay, we let them go within a certain amount of time. Not a lot we don't get a lot of that.
I find that my rates go up after I lay people off. And there have been times when I laid people off because I just needed to. And then the claims come in. I think that the critical thing to understand right out the gate is that the states have different rules. And you really need to understand what are the rules for your state. So I know Liz is in New York. I have a hard time imagining that New York has an employer-friendly system. But knowing things like, well, what are the days of the grace period that you can get rid of? What are the criterion for deciding for or against you? I've only had one contested claim, and it turned out that in the process of that, I had a lot of conversations with the adjudicator, and you can't fire someone because they can't do the job in Pennsylvania and expect to avoid the unemployment claim.
I think that's everywhere, just so everyone knows.
Yes, do all the warning, do all the documentation. That's all good, but really understand what the state sees unemployment as for. And then the other thing is that I think that there's as much impact from the general economy as anything you do yourself, so that the unemployment claim is going to be big if the person lingers on unemployment. So if you get rid of somebody in a time when unemployment is high, you're going to end up paying out a lot of claims. I just went back and looked at all my rates from 2009 to this year, and they were high in 2010, 11, 12, because I had to lay off 22 people, and I ended up paying out those amounts over the next few years. And then now it's down to 1.8%, and it's more to do with not having laid anybody off. And then when I got rid of a couple of low performers in the last few years, they immediately went out and got other jobs, so they just weren't making claims. So there's a bigger context than just what you do. I mean, yes, absolutely, do what you can to understand the system and avoid it, but a big part of your ongoing cost is going to be determined by things that are out of your control.
Which, to your point, those weren't bogus claims. That's what unemployment's for. You had to lay people off. That's what unemployment's for. It worked, and
right, but you end up paying for it.
Yes, but I'm saying, but that's what unemployment's for.
I wonder if this is what Liz was referring to. Aren't there times when you just want to fight whether the former employee should collect unemployment or not? Is that the bogus?
No. Either it's legitimate,
I disagree. And I think that there are definitely times. I had an employee that I fired because he wasn't showing up for work. And I did all the stuff, documenting it, writing it down. And we had the final meeting where his transgressions were to be reviewed, and I filmed it. And what happened was, I sat down, handed him a document. Here's your problem. Here's the policy violation. Started reading it to him. And he threw it in my face and jumped up, basically, screw you, I'm out of here. But he was smart. He said, you can fire me if you want, but I'm not listening to this garbage. And then he just left. And so then I did go and fire him. And then, of course, he claimed unemployment. And I sent this movie into the adjudicator, and I said, check this out. How in the world is this not a quit? And he said, well, it's not a quit. He asked you, he didn't say he was quitting. He said, fire me. And you did. So it's a fire. And the guy took pity on me. He told me exactly how to play it so that the claim would be denied. And it was. And it basically was, the guy had demonstrated that he couldn't be managed. And that instead of me saying that he had quit, I should just say he couldn't be managed,
That is a critical piece of this.
It wasn't a question of competence or whether he could do his job or not. And it wasn't a question of who quit or who got fired. It was he had demonstrated very clearly that he could not be managed, and that was a legitimate reason for me to get rid of him.
You hit on the key piece, which is there's maybe half a dozen reasons why someone's not eligible for unemployment. One of them is they didn't follow agreed upon rules. One is attendance. There's reasons. So you have to pick the reason. I think that,
Jay, before you say that in a blanket way, we should emphasize that these rules differ from state to state.
Yes. My point
what
is
you say about Illinois and what I say about Pennsylvania may be real different in Alabama or New York, for that matter.
I'm 100% with you on this. You need to know the rules, and if you follow the rules, and you have to fire someone for those rules, you will win unemployment. But at least in Illinois, if someone, you can't say, oh, they weren't doing a good job. That's not a reason they don't get unemployment.
I want to follow up on one aspect of what Paul just said. Do we all think it's a good idea to videotape a session where you are letting an employee go?
I think it's a bad idea because there shouldn't be enough discourse to videotape. Termination should be quick, and you should always have somebody there with you. And some of the times we've even had a quick sign off, a quick 2 or 3 sentence paragraph saying, yes, I'm being terminated on this day and done, but videotaping it.
I haven't found it necessary. And B, I find it to be just too adversarial. Personally, this is just my own personal thing. I don't like the idea of returning this into a court case right off. Here, we're going to videotape. I'm not comfortable with it. And I have found that by documenting it, it's worked fine.
Paul, what do you think? Have you continued to do that?
I haven't, but I find the threat of it to be extremely useful. So I did that one, and it actually was really helpful to me in the situation where I was trying to get the adjudicator to see what happened. I mean, the one thing about video is there's no argument about what happened. But since then, what I have done is prepare documentation and have a witness. And what I tell the person I'm about to fire or discipline, when they come in is, hey, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm not going to turn on a camera here. And what it does is it lets them know it could be even worse. They're about to have probably the worst moment or one of the worst moments of their adult lives. And I'm going to tell them that there is a further level of humiliation that I could subject them to, and I'm not going to do it. And that has worked out well for me since then, in that I've discharged 6 or 8 people for cause, and I haven't had any unemployment claims from that, because I try to always leave them with a sense that it's not working out, but I don't bear you any ill will.
So by telling them, hey, I'm going to do you a favor by not recording you right now, I see the bully, and I see the bully and the buddy, right? Like, let me help you help yourself.
I mean, there's no way around it. You got to be hard at some moments as a boss. You just have to be, and you have to do hard things, and they are humiliating, and they are dreadful for the person you're doing them to, and that's just part of the job. But there's ways to do it that make it worse, or ways to do it that make it better. And I'm not a hard person, but I will do a hard thing if I feel like that employees' continued employment is threatening the health of the rest of the team. That's what makes me act. And but I try to always pull back a little bit as the punch lands and try to make it as good as it could be.
Well, let me give you my version of that. Clearly, you have to fire some people, and clearly they're usually not going to be happy about it. And my approach has been, I want to have clean hands, which means they've been talked to about it before. They were given an opportunity to fix whatever the problem was. They've given an opportunity to go look for another job because you said, listen, I'm starting to get concerned. You're the wrong person for this job. They've had all that opportunity. When it comes to time that they have to get fired, I want clean hands. And if they go, which has happened, I can't believe you're doing this, and say, I can't believe you're surprised. We just had a conversation 2 weeks ago, and I told you exactly where we're at. And listen, Bob, if their name's Bob, you don't have to agree with me. Maybe you're right. All I know is this isn't working out for us here. Today's your last day. I wish you well.
I think that one of the critical things is not the meeting that involves the firing, but the one before that. And
probably.
I bring out the full documentation and the full, it's all the same things you would do to fire someone with an escape valve at the end. So there is the written part, there is the witness, there is the policy violation, there's the person has to sign an agreement that they've been in the meeting, they understood what happened. But I always say, I've laid out what I want to change in this document we're both reviewing. I want you to stop doing X and I want you to start doing Y. And if you do that, we'll forget about this. It'll be in your record, but I'm not going to hold it against you. It's a real warning.
You have just described having clean hands. No, you just described exactly what I'm talking about.
Change direction,
yeah,
and bad ones continue down the road, and then you fire them, but they're not surprised.
I just want to make clear, you guys are all performing at a very high level. I am never letting any of you go, except for right now, because we're out of time. My thanks to Paul Downs, Jay Goltz, and Dana White. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.